You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Welcome back to Shoe Radio. That's right, it's the Shoe In Show podcast. Welcome, Matt. Are you there?
I'm here, buddy.
Awesome.
Live.
All right. Welcome to all you shoeaholics to the Footwear Industries podcast. We talk about the biz of the shoe biz. Getting into it. Can you tell I've had 5 cups of coffee?
All the time.
Can you tell I've had 5 cups of coffee?
I can.
You've had some.
Well, we keep it clean on this show. We keep it. See, the guest is already interjecting, Matt. Now
totally,
then, let's just jump into it and get going.
Let's do it. That voice you heard, folks, is Andy Gilbert, who's president of Genesco Licensed Brands. And Andy is a dear friend of all of ours. He's on our board. And we are doing a leadership series as we start 2021. We're bringing a ton of executives to talk about new ideas and what to expect in 2021. And we thought Andy Gilbert should be at the top of our list as he has a lot of insights, throws in a little humor and a little self-deprecation, and then we'll all be on our way. So Andy, welcome to Shoe and Show. We're grateful to have you on.
Thanks, Matt. It's good to be here with you guys after the, certainly after the new year. It's great.
Good. So let's get right to it. We're in a new year. You sit at a company that does a lot, is in Journeys, Johnson & Murphy, that just has a huge history as well as serving a consumer and a generation of consumers that everyone wants to serve. As you sit here from your perch in early 2021, Andy, what are you kind of thinking about this year, and how are you preparing to kind of navigate the year as it relates to where we've just been?
Yeah, well, you know what? I think it's safe to say, Matt, that 2021 will be a better year than 2020. Yeah, I certainly hope so. At least the comparisons are going to be, a lot easier, I think, especially in the first half of the year. Listen, I think we as a company start 2021 with a fair amount of confidence in the consumer. At the end of the day, whether we're on the wholesale side of the business or whether we're on the retail side of the business, our futures are all linked to our consumer. And so we come out of the, sort of the post-holiday period feeling, pretty confident that when the consumer is properly motivated and they've got the disposable, cash, that they will come out, and they will spend. So, as both a retailer as well as a wholesaler, I think, we start the year feeling, pretty confident in our position. And the other thing, that's been sort of a great learning of ours over the course of the last year is the amazing amount of resilience I think that our teams have, whether those be at Journeys or Johnson & Murphy or Shoe or even within licensed brands. We've all found ways to navigate what we hope is one of the most difficult periods, within the footwear business. So, but the big learning is, I think, with the consumer is properly motivated, they've got the disposable cash, you've got the right, product essentially at the right time at the right place. Consumers responding despite, what we've all been living through over the last year.
Let me ask you about stimulus. You've talked about cash in the hands of consumers, and we're in this era where the government's trying to figure out how much cash to dump into the system. There's debates about how much, and $600 checks have gone out, and additional checks are sure to go out. One of the things that always blows me away is in conversations with our good friend, our mutual friend, Cliff Sifford, is how tax refunds impact sales within the family channels. And as you look at the potential for stimulus, how much impact does additional cash direct to American citizens impact shoe sales and the Journeys, for example, like the next week? I mean, where's that correlation as it relates to cash injected in the system and then increased shoe store sales?
It's a good question, Matt. How it impacts us is that we can see those dollars sort of hit the market as they show up. I mean, if you were to look at a regional map of our stores, across the country, you would see where those checks start to hit first, because you'll see an instant spike in comp store sales. And so when you ask, does it have an impact? How quickly does it have an impact? Literally, as soon as those checks start to show up, our comps start to grow. So when the consumers get the money in their hands, they are actually out there spending on those discretionary items. So it's definitely, drives our retail business. Also, I will tell you, having a pretty good view of sort of the retail distribution as well, we see it happening across the board, whether that's in sort of the discount or the off-price channels, whether those are in family footwear, or even within department stores. As that stimulus money starts to make its way out, consumers are definitely out there spending.
And we know Andy Gilbert is buying coffee with his stimulus check in large quantities, correct?
Yes. Of course, I make my own stimulus, Andy, because, the government, it doesn't do me a lot of favors. As a matter of fact, I have to send them something every quarter, a gift. I send them stimulus in reverse. So, but I do like spending my disposable cash on coffee. As we know, we share that passion together.
That's right. Let me ask you, as we look at 2021 at the channels. So you guys obviously have a large footprint and like everybody else have been building e-commerce. But as you look at 2021 and you look at, you guys have a footprint in malls and shopping centers, and 2020 obviously was just absolutely bonkers when it comes to in-store shopping. And there's been a lot of transformations with the curbside and transforming some stores into local deliveries or even, local shipping. What do you see in 2021? Was 2020 like a one-off and we're going to go back to what we were? Is this an evolution of what we're seeing and stores are changing and how they work with the consumer or interface with the consumer? Are malls going to be okay in 2021? I don't really know what to add, but just channel wise, what are you looking at in 2021?
Yeah, that's another really good question. Look, I think there are going to be malls that are going to exist. I think, the idea that malls are going to totally go away, I think is, grossly overstated. I think we're going to continue to see malls. There's going to be, fewer malls, of course. But I think more importantly is that the retailers that survive through all of this are the ones that are going to have to find multiple ways to deliver their retail experience to the consumer, whether that's digitally, whether that's in some affiliation with their brick and mortar stores, whether that's, on-site shopping or if that's curbside pickup. I think all of those things are going to be important as retailers evaluate, how they want to engage with their consumer, for the future. At the end of the day, Andy, the consumer really determines, how they want to be serviced, right? And so it's up to us as a community, whether those are brands or whether those are retailers, to make sure that we're in a good place relative to sort of servicing those consumers as they want to be serviced. As a wholesaler, as a brand guy, it's been a little bit crazy this last year, given the recoil of brick and mortar retail. I don't think that we're going to go back to quote unquote the way things were. I think we're going to continue to see this shift that we've seen towards digital. I do think, brick and mortar has a role to play in terms of servicing the consumer and offering them the sort of instant experience. But at the end of the day, I don't see things going back to the way they were. If anything, and a lot of people have said this over time, this period that we kind of worked our way through the last, 9 or 10 months or so, 12 months or so, largely just pulled forward a lot of the trends that were already in place. And so, retailers or brands that were struggling even more, during this period, and those retailers and brands that were doing well prior continue to do well through the COVID period as well. So.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point that we need to pull out a little bit more, because a lot of, a lot of what we transformed in 2020, like software with Zoom, all this stuff already existed. We just weren't utilizing it either halfway or to the full extent of its ability. I mean, even PLMs and sales software and all these other things, we were kind of playing with it a little bit here and there. Some people were fully into it, obviously, and didn't have a large of a switch they had to flip when all this hit. But it's kind of allowed us to adapt what exists. And what I'm really excited about going forward is the new technologies that we can add on top, since we've kind of shaken the fear off or shaken the rust off, or the apprehension to adopt some of these technologies, where now we're in the digital flow a little bit more. And I'm excited to see what's going to be stacked on top to create those experiences in store, online, but also just in our operations and how we're doing things. Andy, as you look towards the future, not just this year, but going forward, there's always this balance of putting capital towards your backroom operations or putting capital towards your front-facing operations with the consumer. In the next year or two, what do you think gets the most ROI? Like, where are the biggest challenges? Is it making the product and getting it in? Or is it marketing, and is it the sales aspect of it? Where if a brand out there is looking to allocate their capital going forward, where are they going to get the most ROI, do you think?
Well, I think it's, each brand will be a little bit different, right? Some brands, some folks are going to have to really focus in on backroom and infrastructure and make sure that they've got the capability to service the customer and the consumer the way that they want to be serviced, as I said before. But then I think if you assume for a moment, Andy, that we're kind of all on a level playing field relative to, that backroom infrastructure, then it's all going to be, how do you engage the consumer? And I think that's where you're going to start to see elevated levels of marketing spend to get more consumers in your funnel. I think if you don't, unless you just happen to be one of those sort of rare must-have items, I think life's going to be a little bit difficult for you. So I would see us, and I think I see the marketplace generally investing a lot more on the marketing side to really drive consumers to the funnel. Again, assuming that, you've done what you need to do in order to build your backroom infrastructure to support the business.
Does that mean that you have allocated budget for me and Matt as influencers?
It's the single
middle-aged dads.
Our marketing budget is geared towards, Matt and Andy. It's sort of a twofold thing. The ROI is just off the charts. And, our CEO says all the time, as long as you're getting positive ROI, just pump more money to it. So I see no end in sight in that for you guys.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing! A collab between you guys, Journeys, Priest, Polk, and New Balance on middle-aged dads, I think would go a long way.
Wow.
Let's get back to a little bit more seriousness on the comp side. I mean, we've had this conversation a multitude of times. You referenced it, how amazing the comps will look in March and April in particular. How, in a general sense, how does a retailer approach that? And, how do you judge success? What number are people looking for in April of 21 based on numbers in April 2020 to say, hey, we're actually doing really well, or this is a pre-pandemic level? How do you judge what that number should be when you've had such an anomaly of a year?
Yeah, I think the way to judge it is to sort of take a step back, maybe fall back an additional year and look at kind of the calendar year 19 as a benchmark. I think a lot of retailers and brands that I've talked to are thinking about where things were in 19 and using that as kind of the platform for what 2021 in the spring will ultimately mean for us. But and I think for planning purposes, that's fine. But most of the retailers that we have spoken to, especially given the fact that I think we're going to be living with COVID a little bit longer than any of us would like through the course of this year, most of our retailers that we speak to and the brands are being, pretty conservative through the spring season. We're anticipating that certainly March and April and even May will be better than it was a year ago. We certainly hope so, because retail will be open.
Yeah.
But I think, Matt, it's all about being conservative and being thoughtful with budgets. The one downside risk associated with that, I think a good lesson learned from this last year was, most of us felt like it was going to be a while before the retail business and the consumer really started to respond once the doors were open after COVID initially hit. And what we found was that consumers came back and responded, really, really well. And that combined with stimulus really elevated demand. And so we had this kind of seesaw effect, if you will, on the inventory and the logistics side, where, most brands and retailers started shutting off inventory. Consumers came back and responded really well. And suddenly there was a chase on throughout the entire fall season to get goods, back into warehouses, back into inventory so that we could, ultimately get those to consumers. And so I think as we roll into spring of 2021, I think the phrase of the day is just going to be conservative. I think most retailers are planning, light and hoping that, brands for the most part will be in a place to respond if the consumer trends are there.
Now, is that I was just about to ask you about inventory, so you beat me to the punch. I mean, if retailers are going to be conservative on the wholesale side, how are you managing inventory, and how do you? It seems to have a frenetic kind of chase environment to get product doesn't seem to be sustainable, while at the same time you don't want to be left holding the bag. So how do you balance that in 21 with the expectations that retailers are going to be more conservative?
Yeah, it's all about, risk mitigation for everybody. And, the retailers will, at least the multi-branded retailers will mitigate their risk by planning conservatively and trying to respond and react in season. But as you know, as an industry, we all think individually we're doing something unique when in fact we're all doing the same thing. And so it just sort of magnifies the impact of the problem, at least in my view. And so how we think about that, as a wholesaler, let's say, is that, we're going to take calculated risk on key items. And those are going to be on items that we believe are going to help us drive the business for the coming season. And it will happen for spring, and it will also happen for fall. If we happen to miss some business because we didn't, anticipate something taken off to the level that it did, then we'll more than likely, miss business. So, the moral of the story is I think inventories are going to continue to be lean until we as a community, both retail and wholesale, start to feel like that this pandemic is behind us. A lot of the retailers I speak to just on the pandemic side tell me that they're sensing and they're feeling that sometime in June or July, from a how do we go about planning our business on more of a normal level, their feeling is that fall of 21, somewhere in the July, August timeframe, is probably where we're going to start to see, at least from a planning standpoint, things to return to quote unquote normal.
Andy, we've been trying to talk to a bunch of different leaders about leadership during COVID. Obviously, we're doing Zoom calls, and I know you've been able to travel just a little bit to meet with teams here and there when you need to in New York and elsewhere. But as we look forward in 2021, what's some important things that you keep in mind when you're talking to your teams to keep them motivated and keep them productive? Is there any tips or ideas that you can share out there that have worked for you to really keep engaged with teams? I mean, it's hard for everybody working from home or at a distance, rather than being in the office. But what are some ideas that you have that other people could adopt?
Andy, one of the things I think that COVID has taught me is that we do have the ability to work remotely. Yeah. I was not initially a huge fan of the idea of, remote work. I think there's a lot of sort of cultural things that are tied up in people or groups being together on a regular basis that you start to miss. Can you do your job, working remotely? Certainly we're finding and we've demonstrated that we can absolutely do that. But the cultural aspects are the things that I worry most about. And it's the time that we spend together that sort of makes some of our organizations what they are today. So along those lines, we try to, have through the course of a week, a number of days where we're actually in the office as a group together, of course, practicing all the safety protocols. But those folks who are more remote, who live in other parts of the country, we really try to have that frequency of contact. I think in light of anything else, Andy, just that regular communication with your colleagues, the regular communication that you have with subordinates, those things are super important. The other thing that we've done that I really think is fantastic, really it's on two levels, is more broad-based communication. So, Mimi has a regular communique that goes out once a week that updates our entire employee population on what's happening with the company. But even within our divisions, like licensed brands as an example, we have a monthly town hall where we literally invite every employee that we have, every team member to participate in that call. And we review our, performance, and we spotlight, different individuals with some personal information just to make sure that those members of the team who are more remote, who maybe are not as well known, get the opportunity to be well known through these types of platforms. So I think there's just a regular communication. I think the updating on business and where things stand, and just finding creative ways to do that, to me, is the thing that's going to hold the team together through the crisis.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it, because I think it's a key thing as we keep going forward. I think is there's probably this idea that you cannot over communicate enough just to make sure everybody's on the same page and communicating well. So
yeah, Andy, if I could interject one final thing, I also think we have to be disciplined about the time when the clock goes on and when the clock goes off. One of the challenges from working from home is that you feel like you're essentially on the clock 24 hours a day. Now, for me, and probably for you and Matt and others, being on the clock 24 hours a day is not an unusual thing. But I do think you have to find the balance and the time when you kind of shut work off for a little bit, so that the lines don't blur to a point where it's unhealthy when you work at home. So that would be the other thing that I have found, is just finding ways to make sure that the team is sort of disconnected through the course of the day, the week, the month, and the season.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That was especially tough for me at the very start of this, from March until the summertime, of just trying to figure out all the churn that was happening and how we adjust and transform. And then I think by the end of summer, I think we kind of got our flow, and at least me personally, I figured out better how to manage my time and when to cut off and when to stop sending emails. But at the start, I was guilty of that for sure. Yeah. With that, I do want to bring in Jasmine, who is going to do one of her famous segments. Jasmine, welcome. What are we doing today?
Okay, so today we are going to do the world famous "What You Got, What You Getting."
All right.
Andy, I'm not sure if you've done this with us before. I, of course, know a lot about the guys' closet, but I don't always know about our guests and what they like to wear all the time. So on this segment, if you could share what you got on your feet now, what may not be any shoes on your feet at the moment, but maybe what you've been wearing lately, and then what you're planning on getting.
Yeah, like what I wear pretty much day in and day out is going to be super casual, comfortable, slip-on type product, right? I mean, if I'm working from home, which I am most of the time, it's usually a pair of sweats, a casual top, and something that's pretty easy to slip on my feet. And so that's essentially what I'm wearing pretty much, day in and day out when I'm at home.
That is such a downgrade, because for those of you who know Andy Gilbert, he is a dapper gentleman, and to go to sweats and casual top and slip-ons is a degradation in his style portfolio.
Oh, thank you for saying
that. You have a pocket square for your casual top?
Yeah, I've got a pocket square. It's usually in my pocket, though. That's the problem with this outfit. I tell you, one sort of one other little thing. The best gift in the world I did get for the holidays was a way to keep my coffee, warm pretty much all day long. If you don't have an Ember cup, I would encourage anyone out there that's into coffee that wants to keep their coffee at a perfect 140 degrees, pretty much as long as there's something in it. I would encourage you to go shop Ember. It's the best gift ever.
Ember.com. I'm on it right now. Looks sweet.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, we do need to keep the coffee warm, as always, throughout the day as we keep consuming it to keep going throughout 2021. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today and all your insights, as always.
Thank you, guys. It's always great to be with you. I'm so sorry we can't be together in person, but I'm confident that day is coming very, very soon. So you guys take care and be safe.
Yep.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. And folks, this is Shoe and Show. You can visit shoeandshow.com, see our complete catalog. As always, keep following us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Our full catalog's there. Our full catalog's on shoeandshow.com, as I just said. But please stay close to FDRA. Please keep listening to our leadership series as we kick off, so you can hear all these great insights and ideas from leaders at different segments of our industry, from retail to brands to different product categories. The show was really about bringing you to the conversations that we have at trade shows, when we were at trade shows and marketplace weeks, but now remotely from our individual basements, our kitchen tables. So each week we welcome you to join us around the table as we discuss key issues to our industry to help strengthen everyone in our industry. And as always, if you're looking for professional development support, training, upskilling, go to FDRA.org and look at our events, look at our issues, look at our information flow as we try to help the industry continue to get better and better throughout 2021 and beyond. With that, I want to thank Andy again for joining us. On behalf of Matt, Jasmine, and myself, please be safe. Please stay healthy. Please keep wearing those masks. And until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.